We are back for another Christian review of regular books, and today we are discussing the Firefly Lane duology. So let's get into it. For those of you who haven't seen one of these videos before, here's how it's going to go down. First, I do my regular review, my own personal opinion, star rating, what I thought of these books, and then I'm going to get into my Christian review, and that's where I go over the basic pieces of a book that may or may not have a fellow believer or anyone wanting to read it. I do go into way more detail about these Christian reviews at the video that's pinned at the top of the playlist, but also it should be here somewhere at this point, so you can go ahead and click on over there. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you can stay up to date on all of my Christian reviews of regular books, as well as the Journey We Share podcast, which comes out twice a month. I don't want you to miss any of those videos. Please remember that we don't want the conversation to end here. We don't want it just to be like one way. So leave us a comment down below. Let us know what you think of these books or of other books that I've reviewed, or send us an email at hello@trokia.org. Now let's go ahead and get into my regular review. Firefly Lane is an amazing book. Like, I truly enjoyed myself so much. But when I tell people that it's a duology and that Flyaway is the second book in the duology, nobody knows that this book exists. I also think it has to do with the fact that there's a show out on Netflix called Firefly Lane, and so a lot of people know about this one. Secondly, I do think part of that is because the way that this ends, there doesn't necessarily need to be a bow at the end of the book. It ends and it can be closed and be finished. However, Flyaway becomes a bow. It becomes a secondary, it becomes a continuation of a storyline. So I think that is probably why a lot of people don't realize this is even a duology. As a duology, here's what I will say. I think that the storyline was beautiful. I'm glad that I got the duology to Firefly Lane. However, I don't know that the bow was necessary. And this second book is significantly sadder. And so I don't know that I really wanted the storyline to continue from here. Like, I think that this one was hard and tragic and complicated, but it also filled me with hope and beauty and grace versus the way Flyaway happened. And I felt like it just took me on a very traumatizing story. However, let's go ahead and get into each one of these a little bit more detailed. Firefly Lane was the first Kirstin book I ever read. On top of that, in 2012, it was one of the very first books that I added to my Goodreads. I did not know that when I found this copy at a free little library and happened to pick it up and decide to read it. Once I did pick it up, however, I found out that this book is just truly so amazing, and it felt like such a full circle moment to like have one of my first books in Goodreads in 2012 become one of the first books I found from a free little library and picked up in 2024. I had not read any Kirstin, but I had people tell me time and time again that Kirstin is the author that I would love and appreciate. I love historical fiction. I just love the kind of like more dramatized, full emotional stories that she tends to write. And I was not at all surprised that I absolutely was obsessed with this book. This was such a beautiful experience, and experiencing Kirstin writing. It really does take you into the character's experience. You fall in love with the characters. You hate the characters that are doing things wrong. You are rooting for them and challenged by them and struggling to understand them all at the same time. And it was so perfect and picturesque and gorgeous. Now, I'm not going to say that this story is lighthearted and fun, but I will say that it leaves you with a sense of hope in some ways that may not be easy to understand. I think that there are beautiful aspects to this book that really did just completely change my life. And I think about these characters all the time. So much of these characters reminded me of one of me and my best friends who I grew up going to high school with. We like drove together all the time. And so watching this dynamic play out throughout was so beautiful and touching, and really did just have me in my feels. Like I mentioned before, there is a Netflix series based off of this book, and I have heard that the Netflix series does not follow the book. It totally changes the storyline, the characters, development, the plot. So if you watch the show, don't take that as the one and done. I promise you, this book is so good, and I think it's better based on what I know of the show. Ultimately, I rated Firefly Lane 5 stars. I was obsessed with it and could not put it down. I sobbed throughout this book, but like also happy sobs, you know? So it was all the good things. Firefly Lane continues to follow these characters as they go on into the storyline, and it was beautiful, but it was very, very sad. It was very hard to read. I think that, again, where they end in that book was also sad. And so continuing on the sadness that they're on when they get here is so challenging. On top of that, it followed, for me, characters that were in the first book that I didn't necessarily want to follow more of. I didn't want to necessarily see what happened. And so it was not the area I felt it needed to go. However, I still loved her writing. I still appreciated the story. I still felt like I was intimately connected to the characters and read it really, really fast. And ultimately, I rated it 4 stars. One thing I will say about this series and about the characters and about honestly, Kirstin Hannah's writing as a whole is I do think that she needs to do a better job of giving us trigger warnings. Both of these books deal with sexual assault, with suicide or self-harm, with drugs and alcohol abuse. Like, it deals with a lot. And I really think that there are probably people, believers or otherwise, who may be triggered by that content and not want to read it. And I really wish that she would touch on that as she talks about this series or these books. However, I do appreciate reading these books, and now I can provide you with that information so that you know what you're getting into going in. Just a reminder that you can find everything that I'm reading and rating in real time by following me on Goodreads. You can also find me on Instagram, TikTok, and I do have my own YouTube channel, so you can see more of my day today, what I'm reading and rating and what I'm thinking. All of those links are down in the description box below, so you can check them out for yourself. But for now, let's go ahead and get into my Kirstin review. The first category I always love to touch on because it's popular is if there's any smut or spice. And yes, there is spice in all Kirstin Hannah books from my experience so far. They are usually 1 to 2 scenes. They are not super intense. They're not very, very long. However, they are descriptive enough in nature to experience more of a scene. It's probably more like a rated R movie scene, right? Not something that's like super extreme, but it's there and something to keep in mind. I think they're easy to skip over. I always skip over them and not really have it affect the storyline or the plot, and it's ultimately still really enjoyable. The second category is explicit language, and both of these books do have explicit language. I'd say Flyaway has a bit more explicit language than Firefly Lane, but both do have a fair bit. So if that is something that makes you uncomfortable or that you don't want to read, it's something good to know. The third category is violence and gore. Like I mentioned before, there is sexual assault within these books. There is also talks of wars, and so there's a little bit of like violence discussed kind of in the background about people who go to war. And the sexual assault scene is described at the very beginning of one of the books, so something good to keep in mind. I don't think that it's so egregious that you would not be able to read it. However, if you're sensitive towards those things or you're not wanting to read that at all, that's something good to know. I think all Kirstin Hannah books, again, so far, have some sort of kind of violence or heaviness in those categories. Ultimately, I think that these books are probably great for ages 16 and up. Again, just keeping in mind with some of that more mature language. Flyaway does deal with a teenager going through a hard time, and so you see more of that behavior. Obviously, it's not glorified, but if you have a teenager that is maybe struggling mentally or emotionally, that may not be the best book for them at that time, just because there are scenes that are described. As always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you can stay up to date on everything going on our channel, including all of these Kirstin reviews, which are coming out all the time, as well as our podcast, The Journey We Share. We don't want to end the conversation here, so make sure to send us an email at hello@trokia.org or leave a comment down below, and I cannot wait to see you on the next one.